Hello, everyone. Finally, at 8:30, we are live. It's supposed to start at 7 o'clock, but it took a while for people to get here, so better late than never, I always say. So this is Christian Hangout number 40. Yes, this is the first time I've done one of these since I believe November. So it's been a long time. It's almost July of 2018, June 28th to be exact. So as your host, I have to give you this little intro just to explain what's going on for anybody who needs historical markers. And so this time with me, we have Bill Marchant returning for among many times, and we also have first time we have PATRIK Os. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, that's fine. Or just run it all together as Patricos. Either.
Patrikos. Like you're Greek or something.
The name is Greek. Yeah.
Yeah. So Patrick, would you like to introduce yourself, just and give a little bit of your background?
Sure, I'd love to. I am Reformed. I'm a member of a Presbyterian church. Mid-30s, single. That face with no GF, all that stuff. I live in America, and I think that's. I don't know. Do you need any more than that?
Oh, however much or however little you want to tell us is fine. I mean, I guess we got the basics like denomination and background. Did you grow up in the church?
Yes. No, my family pretty consistently went to church. We moved around a few times. Probably the first real experience I had was in a much more seeker-sensitive church, kind of a big Willow Creek style thing. And then my family moved into a charismatic church, so speaking in tongues, faith healing, the whole bit.
Your background actually sounds similar to mine.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry, could we go back? What is Willow Creek?
It's in Illinois. There's this big church called Willow Creek, and my family actually has been there before. For a brief period, we actually went there regularly back when I lived in that area. And do you know who Bill Hybels is?
Name is vaguely familiar, but I wouldn't be able to place it.
Yeah, he's the leader of that church. But yeah, it's basically just like a mega church kind of deal.
Yeah, it's it's an evangelical thing. They basically have no clear distinctives, and as the name implies, with seeker sensitive, they keep everything pretty safe, pretty entertaining, to welcome in potential converts. But of course, if you stay there for a long time, that's also the only thing you're ever getting. I mean, you'll find a lot of good, a lot of good folks in those churches, but not something I'd recommend.
Yeah,
I thought that you said secret sensitive and was kind of like intrigued, but kind of the opposite was seeker sensitive.
It's a Gnostic church.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, I remember my father commented on Willow Creek. He said, I feel like I would get just as much out of this as if I were watching it on TV. That's kind of how it was. It's like just this big auditorium, and they have screens on the upper deck and all that kind of thing. And it's like, actually meeting the pastor and talking to him. It's not like a real community, I guess, or a real sort of church family kind of deal.
Hmm.
Do they have mega churches like that in Canada?
I wouldn't be surprised if they did. No, they do. There is one in Vancouver. I don't remember the details of it at all, but they're their own weird denomination thing. And they I don't remember what it is, but it's like it was something along the lines of laughter as speaking in tongues was their kind of claim to fame. They said that the universal language is laughter, and so that us laughing, unable to control our laughter, that's the That's us speaking in tongues, and then it was a whole thing for a little while. I think it's died down like in the last 10 years, but yeah, that was the biggest single church in Canada for a while.
Huh. I think I have heard of like a holy laughter movement.
Yeah, that was it.
Is that what it was?
Yeah. It was interesting. We'll leave it at that.
I
never went there. I've never went to one of those, but from what I've read about it, it's something else.
I can imagine.
So sorry, I totally interrupted with the Willow Creek question.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I mean, Patrick, do you have anything else you wanted to say about that? Or about your background or anything?
It's one of those things you could talk about ad nauseum. Well, except for those boring amongst us. No.
I'm sorry, I'm boring.
No, not at all. I mean, in terms of my my religious background, I mean, I think like many of us kind of born culturally Christian. Every every point of doctrine was something that held me up before I could go any further, right? I don't know. I lived in anguish for years about baptism and things of that nature. So I've again, I'm not really sure what else to share at the moment, but I think like many born to modernity, I've always felt like I had more questions and answers coming out of church. I mean, for once in my life, finally, I feel the opposite, which has been a huge blessing.
Yeah. Yeah, I know the feeling where it's like you're not always sure what you believe in or always sure how much to believe in. I think in many ways faith is a choice. Like for me, I could sit and question everything to death, but I don't do that because I think it just I have my reasons for believing in God and for having faith, and trying to dissect everything is just going to drive you crazy. Don't need the choice paralysis.
Mm.
Yeah.
Ooh, we're up to 3 viewers now. Are those you guys or?
I think I actually closed my window, so you lost me as a viewer.
Okay. Hey, 3 of you. You guys rock. See if anybody else comes along. But it's all good. I think we were down to 0 viewers once when I was doing one of these, so that was fun. I don't know if this is totally off topic, but on the subject of Hangouts, I noticed that now they do the chat replay when you watch live streams, and I think that's a pretty cool feature because I can think of a few times when the chat is something I would have liked to have preserved. Like the one we did that went for 8 hours. I thought the chat in that one was pretty classic.
Yeah,
and so much of that stuff is
great.
now lost to the ages. I remember we had Giovanni in the chat saying a lot of. I remember they were going back and forth putting everybody's name in triple parentheses, and then finally Giovanni put everybody except me in parentheses. It just kept escalating. But
yeah, I don't know how the chat thing works. Whether it will, like, do you think that they kept the old chat things? Like, have you tried any of the old videos to see if they show up now?
I think that if they I think they didn't have that feature before, so now that is a feature, now you can opt to put that in there.
Okay.
But I assume that for any earlier ones, that just wouldn't show up.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I actually don't know if you have to do anything with the settings to get that. So, hold on a second. So, Patrick was talking about the subject of paedocommunion, which is giving communion to children. Like, did you have any thoughts that you wanted to share about that, or Patrick?
Well, so it's a topic I've been exploring lately because the church I'm a member of does practice paedocommunion, so it's something I've heretofore never really considered very strongly, but now that it's in my face on a weekly basis, I've had to really start wrestling with it, and it makes sense. All of the arguments work out, pretty easily. But like we were just talking about, not being raised in a truly well thought out Christian family, I've got to struggle with each and every issue. I mean, at the moment, it doesn't affect me personally, but it's something I've been exploring, reading up on. It's common amongst a lot of our brethren, especially when you're in right-wing Christian Twitter with all the Orthodox guys. So yeah, again, it's something I've been exploring, but I don't have any, real. Other than that, the answers seem to make sense on their face. I don't have too much to say about it at the moment. I was really just kind of looking for some input from the others.
Now, when you're talking about paedocommunion, you're like, how young are they talking about with the children receiving communion?
After, I would say traditionally after baptism. Certainly in the Orthodox Church, that is the order it happens in.
Right.
But you could potentially do it before, I suppose. But no, right away it's offered. And again, it's not something that you force feed them. Just like you shouldn't make I don't know. Even an older child, a young adult, you shouldn't force them to take communion. It's you come to the table, but the option is open to them. They're offered the wine and the bread, and if they choose to partake, excellent. If not, they are still members of the covenant, by means of their baptism and the faith of their parents.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of churches where it's like you just come forward if you want to, basically, and take communion. But I don't know if they always even check to make sure that you're a member of the church or a member of the faith. They just say, whoever wants to come and take communion can do it. So that's another issue that churches face today. Yeah. Did you have something to say, Bill?
Well, I was just going to ask, what is the argument against paedocommunion? Like, what's tradition put forward?
There's a couple of arguments. The most prominent one, especially in Protestant circles, is basically the same kind of use of scripture they use for adult baptism, which is to say, like, repent and baptize. I'd have to, let me see if I can find the particular scripture. Of course, now it's gonna go all silent as I flip through my Bible. I feel like this should be a lot more fresh in my mind.
Well, so it's the basic idea. If it's like the baptism, then saying something like, and I don't have my Bible with me. I totally, and I'm away from home tonight. The idea that there aren't any examples of people getting communion as children in the Bible, just like there aren't baptisms of children, that kind of thing. So
I think one argument I've heard for baptizing children is that I think in Acts somewhere there's mentioning like evangelizing a certain family. It says every member of his household was baptized, so they say that must have included children. So that's what one Orthodox argument is. fact, I think I have a tract around here that it might have that. I see if I can dig that out.
Well, I mean, I'll say in terms of the baptism arguments, yeah, there's no clear example one way or the other of infants being or not being baptized. It's just not in the scriptures. So from there, it really depends on your theology in terms of what you see baptism as, and kind of how you build on it from there. I mean, I know that you know, the Baptist argument is typically repent. You know, the scripture, repent and be baptized, as well. Children, especially infants, aren't capable of vocalizing a repentance. So therefore, they cannot be baptized, or should not be baptized, or it wouldn't be valid. But I mean, the both the Catholic and Orthodox churches, as well as the vast majority of Protestant churches, all affirm child baptism. It's seen as being, it's linked to circumcision, even pretty explicitly within Scripture, which is so in the same way that Abraham had his son circumcised, so too should you have your son baptized. It's a circumcision of the heart. So it's just a new sign for a new covenant, but related.
Sorry, just real quick.
Mm-hmm.
Acts 16:33 is the jailer and his entire family were baptized without delay, from what I'm looking on Shmoop. So yeah, that would kind of imply that if it's his entire family, then there's probably some children in there.
Right. That's it's implied, but
right. Yeah.
It's you got to be careful with that kind of argumentation. Although I will say, I think a little bit more interesting. I believe it actually uses the word household, which
that's
would be
1615. Yeah, Lydia household were baptized.
Yeah, which would be much more expansive than just his family. I mean, that would probably have included any servants he had, certainly slaves. Also, it might have been his extended family, especially if they were living, like say on a shared family farm or something of that nature.
True.
So,
I actually pulled out this tract, and in addition to the ones that Bill just mentioned, there's also Acts 11:13 through 14 says, "Send men to Joppa and call for Simon, whose surname is Peter, and who will tell you words by which you and all your household will be saved." And there's also, they give Acts 18:8. "Then Crispus, the ruler of the synagogue, believed on the Lord with all his household, and many of the Corinthians, hearing, believed and were baptized." And also 1 Corinthians 1:16. "Yes, I also baptized the household of Stephanas." So I guess there are other examples where they talk about baptizing households.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It does, in the same tract, though, it does say things like how it talks about the Protestant Reformation, how Zwingli said that the controversy over infant baptism did not arise in its present form until after the Protestant Reformation. Even Martin Luther and John Calvin insisted on the practice. It was with Ulrich Zwingli of the Swiss Reformed Church that the first serious objection arose. Several of Zwingli's students rebaptized themselves, proclaiming that they did so because their infant baptisms were invalid, since they were not accompanied by professions of faith. So I guess they're saying this is the controversy over it came out of the Reformation because some reformers didn't believe in it.
Well, it's probably where it got its biggest foothold. But no, there were adult baptizing sects much earlier than that. Like if you I forget what it's called now, but there is a view amongst some Baptists that you can find Baptists throughout all of history, and that they are the clear inheritor of the church. And they actually do a pretty good job at pointing out multiple groups who did practice adult baptism. I think the Waldensians did, although I don't recall specifically. I believe the Paulicians did, which is an older sect. So it's been around for a while, but yeah, it never really took off and was typically involved with some other, I don't know, other beliefs that were unfavorable to the church / secular rulers of the time. So
sounds like you know a lot more about the history of it than I do.
Yeah. I don't know. I've read an overview. I've read summaries of a lot of books. That's where I get all my knowledge from. Just the Cliff's Notes.
Yeah, I remember sometimes reading a Cliff's Note version is sufficient.
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can't know everything, right?
Yeah. I remember like reading this summary of a book about the Jews in Portugal, and it basically explained, and it basically gave you everything you needed to know what the book said, I think. It was kind of entertaining because it was just whining about how the Jews are mistreated, but that's a whole other issue. So anyway, baptism and stuff.
Communion, right? That was where we were.
Oh yeah.
We used baptism as a metaphor for communion, but we wanted to talk about communion.
Patty McGill says, "Be Catholic." Well, if there were some Catholics present, I'm sure they'd be totally on board with that. But Patty McGill, I guess he's an Irishman.
Oh well.
Hey Patty, nice to hear from you. Been kind of silent there. But anyway, about communion, yeah. I also have a tract about communion from my days exploring Orthodoxy called Communion, a Family Affair, Why the Orthodox Church Practices Closed Communion. I think it just talks about, I think it seems that's more about, well, I guess closed communion is just about why they don't allow non-church members to take communion in the church. But I don't know if it has anything about like paedocommunion.
Well, I would imagine it does if it's from an Orthodox point of view. As far as I understand, the Eastern Orthodox universally practice paedocommunion or covenant communion, whatever you'd like to call it. But and again, there are other groups that do it. For our Catholic friend, the Byzantine Rite practices it. I believe there's another rite somewhere. It was also the practice of the Roman Church until I don't know the 18th. Or I'm sorry, not the 8th century.
Oh. So, what is the current Catholic position on communion? I confess I don't know exactly.
Oh, I think that's a big topic. What precisely do you mean?
Well, about like what age you have to be to take it?
You need to be confirmed, which I think is generally around the age of or it is at the age of reason, which I think generally means about 12.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds right. I forgot about confirmation.
Yeah, but again, I'm not Catholic enough to know the answer to that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not seeing anything about the subject of paedocommunion in this. It's all about just closed communion. So I guess that's I just thought it was worth a look to mention communion.
Oh, sure. Well, now I feel like I'm the only one that wants to talk about this. I'm so sorry.
No, it's fine.
No.
I think it's been an interesting discussion so far. And you know how these hangouts go, we'll talk about something for like, we just kind of bounce around from topic to topic because we're not good at staying on subject.
I'm
Sure,
totally
hang on.
interested. I want to know what the various positions are. I don't know enough to be like helpful at all. You know?
Yeah.
Well, I wish I knew enough to fully explain it. Again, unfortunately, I'm still kind of exploring.
Patty
but,
McGill tells us First Communion is before confirmation. Thanks, you good Irishman.
I believe there's a rule somewhere that says if you want to know the answer to something, declare something else, that you know is not the answer to be. Someone will show up and answer it.
Kind of like when Donald Trump tweeted those false crime statistics about racial differences, and people are like, "That's wrong. Here's the real ones."
Yeah, exactly.
That was a pretty good troll.
So I guess to continue this topic, so I know some of the major arguments used for paedocommunion. So again, these are these children are baptized members of the church. They're within the covenant. So why should they be excluded? Especially when we've got passages of Christ saying, let the children come to me. Additionally, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, I wish I knew enough to just lecture you guys. Instead, I wanted to ask questions, and that was a terrible idea.
I'm sorry for not being able to give good answers.
Well, I suppose that's what my elders are for, right?
Yeah. I'm not that much older than you, so only a couple of years.
Yeah. I guess I
don't know
meant.
how old Bill is.
No one
Yeah,
knows how old Bill is.
Bill's like Alice Cooper. He can be any age he wants to be. Yeah. Yeah, the Alice Cooper, the guy who plays Alice Cooper, he said that Alice is a persona. He can be any age he wants to be.
That makes sense. Yeah, he's still trying for the. He's kind of getting past that point now, though. Like he's
Really?
getting a little bit long in the tooth, where it's kind of odd to see him dressed up as like a school child. But yeah, it's like a campy thing 15 years ago. Yeah, he could do just about any age.
Yeah. He's always 18 and still doesn't know what he wants. Yeah. Do you know he's a Christian, by the way?
Yes, I did
I
read that
really.
somewhere.
I saw this video of him talking about his faith, and I guess he grew up as I think maybe he said his father was a preacher, and so he grew up in the church, and he said that even though he kind of like fell away from the faith while he was early in his music career, he still kind of maintained a sort of Christian morality. He says, if you look at my music, there's always been this message of, there's good and there's evil. Don't choose evil. So I think it's probably on YouTube, him talking about it. It's very interesting.
Watch that video, listeners, after you're done this one.
I'll probably...
You're already on YouTube, so have a look when you're done.
That's right. I'll find a link. I'll look for that video and post it below once we're done. Yeah, Alice Cooper, he's quite a character. I remember he used to have that radio show where that was always it was like a syndicated radio show, I think, and he was always very entertaining as a host.
I never listened to it. We don't get a whole lot of Like what we get up here is really hit and miss of the things that you guys had versus the things that filters up here. That was not one of them. Radio generally is not filtered up here.
Doesn't the CBC have some rule that 50% of all broadcast content has to be Canadian produced?
That's not just that's the CRTC.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's our governing body for broadcasting.
Yeah.
So that's all of the radio stations have to have. I don't remember what the percentage is. I don't think it's 50%, but it's pretty high. Like even music stations, they have to have. I think it's a third. It's either a third or a quarter of all songs have to be Canadian.
I read that Canadian radio stations will usually just play Canadian stuff at like 3 a.m. when no one's listening, just to fulfill the requirement.
Yeah, the what was it called? The Beaver Hour, I think.
Right, the Beaver Hours.
I've heard they did away with that.
Yeah, they do the breakdown by like in like 4-hour chunks or something, or 3-hour chunks. I'm not in radio. I don't know how exactly it works, but yeah, you don't get that anymore. You used to, but no, they usually fill it in with Drake and the Tragically Hip and
Justin Bieber.
Justin Bieber, yeah, that was
Nickelback.
great for them. Nickelback, yeah. Celine Dion, if they're one of those.
Although my understanding is that there's 3 qualifications. You know, one of course is the musicians themselves, but then also the writer and the producer.
Yes.
So there's a lot of music production done in Canada now.
Yeah, and there was some. I remember that there's a couple of songs that because it's a cover of. I think it was Lenny Kravitz's "American Woman" counts because if I remember correctly, and this could be the wrong song, but Burton Cummings wrote the song as part of the Guess Who.
I thought Randy Bachman wrote that one.
Sorry, Randy Bachman. You're right. Randy Bachman wrote the song. And then the Lenny Kravitz version was produced by a Canadian. It's something like that, where it's a big American song, but it technically counts as a Canadian one because it's a cover and the producer happened to be Canadian.
I didn't know that. I remember when that song was big back in, what was it, like 99 or so? I remember when that song was all over the radio here in the States too. I remember I didn't really like that song, to be honest.
I am not a fan of that song. I don't mind the original, but I'm not a fan of the cover.
Honestly, I don't really like the original that much either. Not a fan of the song in general. Not just because it's an anti-American song, but because I don't know, musically it just doesn't appeal to me that much.
Understandable.
I do like the Guess Who. I just never liked that song for whatever reason. I think No Time's a good song. What other stuff do they have? No Time for You. No Sugar Tonight.
Yeah, No Sugar.
Trying to remember. Yeah, I know they have some good ones. I can't think of them all offhand. I'm not like a huge Guess Who freak or whatever, but I like
These Eyes.
Yeah, that's a good one. These eyes have seen a lot of love, but they're never going to see another woman like I had with you.
Yeah. Clap for the Wolfman.
I don't think I know that one.
That's a weird one. We hear a lot of the lesser known B-sides from bands like the Guess Who because they're big enough that the radio stations can get away with it. Where they're like, yeah, we need another Guess Who song in this. We need another Canadian song, so we'll go with New Mother Nature.
Oh, that's another one. Yeah, I remember that. I know that there was a American group that covered that song. I think it was the Friends of Distinction. Was that who it was?
I haven't heard the cover.
Oh. Yeah, there was a group that sang "Grazing in the Grass." I like when we end up talking about music all the time. It's such an easy topic. But yeah, I like music, and so I enjoy talking about it. In fact, I wouldn't mind just doing a music hangout regularly.
That'd be fun.
Yeah. course, I just have to find the time. I want to do other stuff too. So
time is the problem. Time is the enemy.
you know, it's funny. I remember I used to be really big on these like top 100 lists. Sorry, this is really not Christian content anymore. So if you're sorry, listeners, if this is boring music nerd stuff, but I remember I used to look at like MTV would make these lists of like the top 100 music videos of all time, and I looked at what the Much Music version was, and it had all these Canadian groups on it instead. So
yeah, that'll happen.
So I'm like who's Blue Rodeo? I don't know who this is. Like, what is that?
I can't explain Blue Rodeo to you. You had to be there. 5440.
Tom Cochran.
Yeah, Tom Cochran.
All these guys who, I mean, Tom Cochran, I think he's like semi-well known in the U.S., but he's not like a big star or anything.
Who are some of the other ones that like only we ever hear of?
I know Bare Naked Ladies used to be they kind of made it big in the U.S. I mean, I have a lot of their albums, but for a while they were like Canadian. They were a Canadian secret.
They got pretty big. They got pretty big.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. I've noticed that there's a lot of bands. They kind of like start getting popularity, but it's like if you're like really into music, you'll hear about them, and then it's like one of those where they're like borderline huge, and then they get really huge, and then like everybody's heard of them. So that's kind of how Bare Naked Ladies was. I think that in '96 or so, they kind of had people who were in the know knew who they were, but in '98 when One Week came out, that's when they really became a household name.
Yeah. Oh, Arcade Fire is.
Oh, I've heard of them. Yeah.
Reasonably well known. Alexis on Fire.
Don't know that.
With the Wikipedia page.
I never would have heard of Bruce Cockburn if it weren't for Bare Naked Ladies doing Lovers in a Dangerous Time.
Oh, yeah. Oh, there was one that I was trying to think of. It starts with an N. Where they're like vaguely close to famous in Canada, but no one outside of Canada has ever heard of them.
Well, I'm not in Canada, so I probably haven't. But does Rush count as Canadian? I know.
Oh, yeah.
They probably want to get their stuff then.
Yeah, we get a lot of them.
We're losing viewers.
Okay,
let's just call it the Music Nerd Hangout.
So let's bring this back a little bit. Music in church. What kind of music should be in church?
I'd say hymns only.
Hymns only?
Hymns only? Oh, that's a radical position.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't like modern praise and worship music. It just kind of leaves me cold. There's very little of it that's actually good. I think on an old Hangout we discussed this once, but that was like a long time ago, like 2016 or so.
So, I'm sorry. I was gonna go ahead.
No, it's fine. I didn't. Go ahead.
Well, I guess I wanted some clarification. You said hymns only, but I take it you would also accept psalms.
Sure. If it was a psalm set to music.
Right. Okay. I just was a little taken aback because I guess I've heard several people talking about, psalmody only is kind of I don't know, it's a movement within Christianity, but I hadn't heard of, I guess, psalmody exclusionary.
I don't think that's what he meant.
No, I wasn't
I'm
sure.
Actually just,
so
I'm actually trying. I don't necessarily believe in hymns only. I think that, but I do think that I do think it's important that church music should be a form of catechism. So they should be theologically correct. They should be They should have poetic value. Like it shouldn't just be like, oh, I feel so nice, I love Jesus. Like that's just very. I feel like that's kind of not enough, and I think that too many Christian songs fall into that, or they're focused on more on being like catchy and being singable. and I don't know. I think that there are a lot of old hymns that they're not necessarily like songs that would be radio hits, but the point is to like instill a certain understanding of the word in the people singing it. So I guess that's my view that we should take music in church seriously, and it should be ultimately, like I said, a form of catechism.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
It should be. I remember when I was in college. Actually, I actually briefly played in a worship band for this group, and we're having a discussion about praise and worship songs we hated, and this one guy was saying, he's like, I really hate that song. Come, now is the time to worship. He's like, that's not a worship song. Like saying now is the time to worship is not worshiping. It's like you could just be saying like, come, now it's time to eat dinner. I mean, it's like it's the same exact thing. Like you see people like raising their hands and like getting into it, like, come, now is the time to worship. It's like it's just a call to worship. It doesn't actually say anything. I guess one day every tongue will confess you are God. That's about the only thing. But it's not really that worshipful in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's I mean, I don't know, the way we worship God certainly matter. You know, like it's not just that they should have theological content. You know, they should really say something about the God we're worshiping. But I mean, it's also how God wants to be worshipped, right? I mean, it's one of the reasons why we have, you know, all David's Psalms and the like. And I don't know. I guess I've never spent too much time in churches that have that kind of music, but certainly I've seen it infect, you know, Christian radio stations where it's, you know, I think we've all kind of heard the trope, you know, Jesus as my boyfriend songs.
Yes, I know that phenomenon.
Yeah, and it's. I mean, it's spot on whenever you hear one of these, you know, like I don't know. I would try to sing a bar, but whew.
No, it's someone that wanted to be a top 40 singer and couldn't make it for whatever reason, so rebranded themselves and changed the lyrics so that it was about Jesus instead of their boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, and did that. Like,
yeah, I remember hearing that the group Striper, that used to be their sort of formula, that they'd have their quote ballad song, which was written lyrically ambiguous enough where it could sound like they're talking to a girl, but it's really about Jesus.
that's mind-blowing to me.
Sorry, what?
That's mind-blowing to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. I remember probably even just like 10 years ago listening to Christian radio once and thinking how it just sounds like the sort of cheesy pop music that's on the radio today, and it's not that great. But even so, like, I don't know. I find a lot of Christian pop music to be kind of dull. Like, it sounds very like. Do you know that there's this kind of sound where it's like usually acoustic guitar based? It's very echoey. It has this very like mysterious kind of what's the word I'm looking for? This kind of this feel where it has this very like ethereal, maybe that's the word I'm looking for, kind of feeling to it. Just the way it's produced and mixed. So, like, I hear so many modern day Christian songs, and they all have that same kind of tone to them. It's just I don't know. It's like I think of it as like that's the Christian music sound or the contemporary Christian sound.
Yeah, you can always kind of tell when you tune to a random radio station and it's a Christian rock song or whatever, you can always tell even before they get to the lyrics that this is a Christian rock song or a Christian pop song or whatever it is. And I don't like, the thing is, I figured that that's better than like listening to, I don't know, whatever the top 40 pop songs are right now. But I don't want that in.
That's how all the top 40 sounds to me. It's just really compressed beats with inane lyrics talking about sex or something.
Yeah.
And
so I think it's better than listening to that, but I don't want those in church. No, that's not the Christian pop songs are not. That's not what church is for.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know. I mean, Christian radio is great that you can, I don't know, be sure that your kids aren't going to hear songs about, I don't know, murder and drugs and hookers or whatever. But yeah. I mean, we need more than that in church.
Yeah. I absolutely love when there's an actual choir. When I go to a church and there's a real choir and they've obviously like been doing it for however many decades, and like there's continuity of the people that have been in it and then their kids are in it and all that kind of stuff, and yeah, I love that.
I'll admit, I've always enjoyed choir music. Like, I remember even when I was younger, I would enjoy listening to choral music on the Christian radio station. There's something about that just I really like.
Now, what about if we kind of expand this a little bit, using churches that have great acoustics for like putting on school musical things like Handel's Messiah, like obviously Christian based musicals, but thoughts on that? Is that like using the church building for other still Christian but not directly church related things?
Yeah,
that's an interesting question.
Quite the gray area.
Well, I'm sure some of this is, of course, going to depend on your, I guess, denominational bent. But I mean, many churches do use, their sanctuaries or worship halls for other purposes, right? Whether it be like a congregational meeting, just talking business, or I mean, I attended a church for a while that put on, a Christmas play, and they, use the same stage. Or sometimes you'll have guest lecturers or something, or maybe, maybe not lecturers, but like a missionary coming to the church to talk about their missions trip. So
or
I mean,
a Jew coming in and tell you what the Old Testament really says.
yeah, of course. Oh boy, those show up a lot. Yeah, so I mean, I think it is already used for other things. Again, it might be a bit different in other, especially like the Catholic world. I'm sure it would be looked at much differently.
Yeah, I just thought that it was an interesting question. Like, is there biblical support either way? Whether, like, obviously, beating on the money changers in the temple, so don't have like that kind of thing. But as far as things that are tangential to worship in that, do you guys know of any biblical sources on that?
I mean, the Bible doesn't really talk about churches being big buildings. They were more like small congregations of believers when the Bible was written, weren't they?
Well, like the analogy would be to the temple, right?
Mm-hmm.
in terms of this particular usage for it. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, yeah, no, I definitely see the connection. And like you were saying, in terms of throwing the money changers out, that certainly makes, yeah, if you see an ATM with fees in your church, maybe you should run the other way. But whether or not you should open the building up to other uses, yeah, I don't know, that's interesting. I've never really thought about it.
I suppose a lot of people would say that if they have a building that's being used for other events, like, I mean, I've seen events that took place in churches that weren't Christian related at all. They weren't like there was nothing anti-Christian about them, but they were just secular events that they used the church as a venue for. And I mean, they also use churches as polling places sometimes. So if you believe that democracy is against Christianity, that could be seen as blasphemous.
I do indeed.
Yeah.
I mean, I go to a church to vote locally.
Yeah. Yeah, I did as well this last time. But oftentimes, I've noticed anyway, I mean, that's more like in the entry hall area, or maybe they've got a gymnasium or something. But
oh yeah, true. The kind of distinction between the sanctuary and the rest of it.
yeah, and I guess that's kind of what I was imagining you were talking about initially. Because I mean, yeah, I don't see any particular. I mean, obviously, a church can hold I don't know, like a Piss Christ art gallery in their gymnasium. That would probably be a poor choice. But in terms of whether or not they should allow, I don't know, like the example you gave, right? Handel's Messiah, like in the sanctuary, is, I don't know. That's interesting. Something to consider.
Yeah, I don't know if I can't imagine like a Catholic church doing that. It seems like more I don't know, because I know that like in the Orthodox Church, for example, there's like they have the 3 doors or the 2 doors or however. Well, yeah, there's 3 doors, and only priests are allowed to go behind the 3 doors. And so I'm guessing they wouldn't let that venue be used for some sort of production. But I don't know. In Catholics, I don't know about them doing that either, but who knows? Like, I guess Protestants tend to downplay the idea of the sanctuaries being like a holy place in itself. Like that, like, I mean, it's holy. Like, they might see it like, yeah, go on.
Well, I was going to say, I mean, part of this is the different views on, especially communion, right? I mean, within the Catholic and Orthodox view, it's, Christ is literally present, and so yeah, to be using that area for other things, I can see how that would easily be, a pretty serious issue, right? But whether you're a memorialist or whatever, one of the other views on communion, none of them really say that Christ is literally present at the time. So I mean, again, it changes things, right? To most Protestants, like looking at the actual theology, I mean, the building is just a meeting place. There isn't anything particularly sacred contained there that I couldn't just as easily do, outside in a tent or, in my home. But since, I mean, again, it's the Catholic Church is, blessed ground. And then again, for me, I imagine that the biggest issue for Catholics would just be the real presence of Christ. Although I don't know that for a fact. But I think that's why you can't imagine Catholics doing it. It's just, yeah, because it is a sacred place.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought of it as being tied to communion, but that is an interesting way to look at it.
Well, clearly, I've been reading too much about communion lately.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm kind of curious where they put on Handel's Messiah, like when it was written, and it's looking like it was at a great music hall. Oh no, and it also looks like he did not. From what I'm reading in here, is that he got the choirs from churches to do it for him. But I'm not seeing anywhere in here where he actually did it at a church. So, gives some historical context for that question.
When was Handel's Messiah first performed? What year?
1741/42. Oh.
We always think of that one. I always associate that with Christmas. Is that about the time it was? I don't know if you know.
Premiere. I'm just on the Wikipedia page. No, it looks like it was April, so he would have done it for Easter.
That actually probably makes more sense.
Yeah, but you're right. I couldn't imagine going through a Christmas season without at least hearing Handel's Messiah once.
Yeah. And he shall reign forever and ever. I see we're down to 2 viewers. That's their loss. I'm sure that posterity will appreciate this. 3 Gifts, 3 Rules says, talk about why Jesuits are a force for good. Well, I think that's going to be a very short conversation.
They think about weird things. I'll give them this. There is a book. I don't remember the name of it, but like it's Can You Convert an Alien? And it's all about a group of Jesuits answering really, really weird questions. So, like for example, the one that the book is named after is them figuring out whether, if we were to like meet aliens, like extraterrestrials, whether we should and could convert them to Christ. And like that's just the kind of thing that most other people aren't thinking about. So kudos to them for that.
Well, that is actually an interesting question because, I mean, like, I think that, I don't know if you remember the movie Contact. I think it was based on a novel by Carl Sagan where there's a Jodie Foster character where she's like trying to make contact with aliens, and then there are these, I guess there's some like, you know, ultra-conservative preacher who's like, this lady's trying to undermine the power of God or something like that. So, I mean, I suppose that if there were ever contact with aliens, this question would eventually come up. Not that that's something I think we necessarily need to explore here, but
oh no,
I'm not necessarily. I'm agnostic about that whole issue, whether there's life outside of Earth, but
no. So all I'm saying is that I appreciate the Jesuits for thinking through on the things that no one else is thinking through. Anything else that other people are thinking through, don't. Just stop it. It's not going well. Leave that to everyone else. But keep thinking up new and weird questions. New and weird questions are good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't think of anything good to say about the Jesuits. I don't know. Do they have any hospitals? I've never heard of any.
Well, the Catholics were the ones who started hospitals, weren't they?
I think as an explicit mission of the church, yes. I mean, you know, there were certainly other sick houses and stuff beforehand. I mean, you know, I'm not a hospital historian.
Mm-hmm. That's what I've heard. I heard it was the Catholics who really pioneered hospitals as we know them today. But yeah, I don't know the whole history of it either.
Well, I think I, like everyone else here, is quickly trying to Wikipedia this answer for you.
I'm not trying to Wikipedia nothing. I'm just here trying to make sure this thing runs smoothly.
Oh, well, if that's the case, I should stop worrying so much about facts.
Yeah, we can just make stuff up.
Well, that'll make things much easier. No, the Catholics didn't invent hospitals.
They didn't, you say?
The very first hospital was opened by Billy Graham.
See,
although I've heard he is a Jesuit anyway, so I don't know.
That's not true. Aristotle opened the first hospital, and he was Catholic. I have been reliably informed.
I know that Billy Graham actually used to be a hardcore anti-Catholic.
Oh, I mean, you'd have to
like
be.
Typical Southern Baptist of his day. I mean, I used to be a pretty hardcore anti-Catholic too, so that's from somebody whose mother comes from a Catholic family.
If it makes you feel any better, both of my parents were born and raised and married Catholic, and they are the biggest anti-Catholic bigots I know. They absolutely hate the rest of their family for being Catholics. Like it's pretty crazy. It gets intense.
I assume they're evangelicals.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that figures.
Yeah, I, on the other hand, I don't know. I've got too many Catholic family and friends. I can't quite go that far. But, you know, I don't think old Bill was necessarily wrong about all of it.
Yeah, I remember when Billy Graham died, they were. I found an article talking about how Billy Graham softened on a lot of his positions over the years, and at one time he said like the three biggest threats were communism, Roman Catholicism, and I forget what the other thing was. I think Patrick, wasn't it in the Bible study group that somebody shared that link? Might have been Hans or somebody.
Maybe. I know he didn't. He had some unfavorable things to say about Jews, but I don't.
Richard Nixon.
Yeah, exactly.
But even there, he kind of cucked on that later, didn't he?
Almost certainly. Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what he didn't really cuck on, to be quite honest. I'm not intimately familiar with his career, but I understand that he got quite soft over the years.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I mean, I think the Catholic question is certainly an interesting one.
Where's Lumen when you need him?
Yeah.
He's been in and out of contact with me lately. I think he's just got a lot of stuff going on. Hope he's doing all right.
Yeah, he pops in on Twitter every once in a while, but I haven't heard too much from him recently.
Yeah, well, I don't want to. He recently, I think, said he was just going through some rough times and he just needed to kind of take a break from it all. So I assume that's what he's doing now because he hasn't responded to me in a little while. But every so often I'll have some contact with him. I don't want to go into his personal stuff, but he's got stressful things going on in his life.
So I see here in the chat, straight white cis Sith male, is since when was Roman Catholicism a threat to anything? And I've got to interrupt because I don't want to say always has it been a threat to everything, but I certainly feel within the American context, it is the disunifying factor. It is where we ran into trouble, is letting Maryland join the Union. I believe very strongly in this.
Well, that is, I mean, as far as Maryland goes, I don't know, but I do know that, like, there was sort of what you say about being a disunifying force. There is something to that, because, like, I mean, I know that, like, when we think of, like, the immigrants from the 19th century, a lot of them were, like, Irish, Italians, and Catholics, basically. So it's like the working class is considered Catholic. And, but so it's like they are kind of like a separate class, the Catholics. And I know that Catholics were kind of like ghettoized at one point, like up until about World War II. They kind of had their own little subset of America.
Yeah, and I mean, like some other groups of people that we've tried to keep separated, I think that was a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, and again, I've got a lot of Catholic family and friends. I love them dearly, but they, America was a safe space for Protestants, and they just had to come in and mess it all up, right? They knocked over our Jenga tower, and we've never been able to really put it back together again.
Now I'm gonna have to counter signal you.
Oh, please do. I'd love to hear this from the Canadians.
Because the second thing that the Continental Congress ever did was send a letter to the French people in Quebec saying, hey, you guys should join with us. We're getting together a Continental Congress. Don't worry the fact that you guys are Catholic and we're Protestant. It'll totally work out. Don't worry about it. So that was like the second thing that they did in the history of the United States.
Well, yeah, ecumenism is a mistake. Like, I think one of the things that we're relearning now, is that we should really own our distinctives. And yeah, I think it's probably these meddling deists, or maybe the Marylanders who were Catholics, just messing things up. Yeah, I mean, it'd be nice if we were one big unified continent or whatever, but a united people, united by faith, is a powerful thing. That's something that I think we can all see today in Poland, or the Islamic world, or whatever. When you don't have to fight over these, incredibly important things with every single person you meet throughout your day, like it allows you to, after that, it's all just details, right?
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm not saying that you're wrong for being against it. I'm saying that from the very beginning, you guys have been trying to not have it be a safe space for Protestants.
Well, that wasn't me. I assure you. I would have stormed Canada and burnt down their White House. Whatever you call that thing. Is it just like a sugar shack or something? I don't know.
Yeah, that's what I think of.
Is it the Ice Palace? Is that
the Ice
like
Palace
in Toronto? Yeah.
Montreal.
I was in Montreal. Ugh. I wouldn't go there. Never mind.
Well, a quick question about Quebec at the time was so was Quebec controlled by the French at the time?
No. So that was the interesting thing was, and this is, I'm actually writing a piece about this, but there was the 7 Years' War, or you guys call it the French Indian War, and that was to subdue the Frenchies in North America. And at the end of that, Britain got to control what was essentially Quebec, but they called it Canada. And they had a lot of difficulty doing that because they weren't British people that they were trying to control. They were Frenchies, and they had their own system of doing things. They had an absolute monarchy at the time. They had they were Catholic. They had their levels of education were ridiculously low, like 2% or something ridiculous like that.
They talked about liberté, égalité, fraternité.
No, before all of that. In fact, that didn't come to Quebec until the.
I guess that's right. That was before. That was after the Continental Congress. Yeah.
Yeah. So what happened was the British Crown did all kinds of crazy, weird things in order to properly govern Quebec or Canada, and the Americans down south before the Revolution were seeing all of the crazy things that the British were doing to Quebec and saying, "Hey, are they planning on doing that here? Is that their ultimate goal? Is they're easier to like have absolute monarchy? Like they didn't have elections, or they only had like minor elected roles in Quebec because they didn't want them. They wanted just a governor type guy." So the Americans were like, "Well, why did you take away their elections? How could you possibly do that? This is a British colony and you took away their elections? You're going to take away our elections next." And that was a major impetus for the American Revolution, was them thinking that they were using Quebec as a testing ground for these policies of no democracy and no representation, and that they helped with tithing. They helped the collection of tithes somehow. I don't remember exactly how it worked, but so the Americans were all heated about that.
Interesting. I didn't know that. So you're saying you're writing a piece about this right now?
Yeah, I'm not sure where I'm gonna put it, but I'm
Just go on Northern Reaction.
Oh yeah, it is going to be Northern Reaction. I remember why, and it's going to be because it's going to be part of my Blame Canada series, and it's going to be Canada for America.
Yeah, I was curious when you're saying you weren't sure where you were going to put it. I could have sworn you had a blog and a book.
I do, but I've been doing a bunch of like things for other people, and I couldn't remember where I had. I have another thing that I'm working on that's going to another site, like a guest post on another site or something, and I couldn't remember which one was which for a minute. That's all.
Excellent. I will say for those out in the chat, read Northern Reaction. It's excellent.
Oh, you read my book?
I've read portions of it. Look, I mean, you know how it is.
It's a long book. I understand.
You've got 150 books that all need to be read right now. So yeah, I mean, I've read some of it. I hope one day to finish it, but maybe after the collapse, I'll find it and it'll be a titillating read.
No, perfectly understandable. I don't mind people just buying my book and putting it on their bookshelf. That doesn't bother me.
I will say I was a bit disappointed. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It'll be prominently displayed right next to Ta-Nehisi Coates.
So I've actually got it right now shelved between The Real Right Returns by Daniel Freiberg and Free Speech Isn't Free by Roosh. So that's where it's at on my bookshelf. Roosh V.
Yeah, I didn't know he had a book out.
He's got a lot of books out. Most of them are about banging sluts, but he does also have a serious book, which was about his time getting shut down. But that's besides the point.
Well, I'm all right with that placement. That's fine.
Yeah. If it makes you feel any better, I also haven't read Rush's book, and I've read far less of it.
Do you have a gorilla mindset too?
No, I do not have gorilla mindset. I never bought into that guy. I'm sure I've got a few other questionable books on my shelf, though.
I almost bought gorilla mindset, but then I thought better of it.
Now, on the other hand, I am really excited for Bronze Age mindset.
Yes, my copy just showed up a few days ago.
It still doesn't ship to Canada for free.
Oof.
Yeah.
TFW, no free shipping.
Yes.
Let me just check, because maybe you got it working in the last couple of days.
I gotta say, I was a little upset when the book first came out. As far as I could tell, anyway. Maybe it's just because I don't know, I'm terrible at these technologies, but it looked like it only came out as an ebook, and then 2 days later, the paperback dropped. So I actually own 2 copies of Bronze Age Mindset.
Oh, he did get it published. It's working in Canada. I can now buy this book. No, he published them separately. Like, apparently it was more work, like there was more formatting work to do on the paperback, so he just wanted the Kindle edition out quick. So he put that one out first and then finished up the things that needed to be finished up with the paperback and published that after.
It's understandable. It was just frustrating because, like I said, now I own 2 copies of it, which I suppose, it's always nice to support our guys, but like, I do have limited funds, right?
Yeah.
I can't buy infinite books. That was actually one thing I wanted to say, Bill. Is I remember your book is specifically priced so that you earn 0 on it.
Yeah.
I was very disappointed by that. I did want to actually support the guy whose book I was buying, but whatever. I guess I'll get over it.
Well, I do have if you go on my website, I have a whole rant about that, about how I don't need the money. I don't want your money. Give it to someone else. If you want to donate however much a normal book would cost, then donate like the difference between how much my book costs and a normal book to something that you want to support. And I think I gave a couple of examples on the site, like with links to donation pages and that kind of thing. So do that instead. I don't need the money.
Oh, absolutely. No, I seem to remember that, and I certainly donate to a number of different places. But I don't know. I guess it's I feel like there's a lot of people out there who will say like, no donations. I don't want any of that. And then 6 months later, like, guys, I really can't afford to do this anymore. It's just not working out. It's like, well, I've been trying to give you my money.
Yeah. No,
So,
that I promise that will never happen.
Fantastic.
I'm gonna keep doing what I'm doing.
All right.
Like, because there's no cost, right? Like that's what the book thing ends up being, is that you're paying for the printing and shipping costs.
Right.
So yeah, ends up being neutral for me.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. I understand what you're doing. It's just, again, I don't know how many people have disappeared from, the I don't know, whatever you want to call this big thing, but just due to lack of cash incentives, we'll say. But yeah, so Bronze Age Mindset. Go buy it now. It's available in Canada for those of our listeners who are in Canada. Northern Reaction might be available in Canada.
Definitely available in Canada, of all of the places.
I've heard that the Canadian Post doesn't deliver to Canada. It's too out of the way and inconvenient.
That probably wouldn't be a bad financial decision on their part, if we're being honest.
Yeah.
But no, yeah, you can get my book in Canada, and now you can get Bronze Age Mindset in Canada. So yeah, go on, all of you people listening or watching. I don't know how many that is. I don't kind of want to know right now. But however many you are, go and buy a bunch of books, including mine. After the Hangout, obviously. Hello.
Hey there.
Hello.
Jay, is that what you want us to call you?
Oh, you can call me Joe. Joe's good.
Okay.
Hello, Joe.
Welcome, Joe.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, you're a Christian and stuff?
Yeah.
Care to share your background?
Oh, I'm Catholic. I should put that out. How's my mic sounding, by the way?
Sounds alright. We can understand you.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, so I'm Catholic, cradle Catholic. Been brought up my entire life. Had kind of a, my conversion kind of intensified, I guess, in middle school. Since then, it's been getting deeper into prayer, getting deeper into spirituality. That's my background, I guess.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad you missed our anti-Catholic segment then.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'm very glad I missed it. But perhaps I could have done my faith some justice, though.
Do you have a Twitter account?
I do. I used to be at Able the Just. That was my
Okay.
old account. Now I'm not at that account. I'm at a little locked account at Jostra Etate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bill suggested a few different people. I wasn't sure which one you were.
Yeah. Which other ones did Bill suggest out of curiosity? Is Chingo Kid in here?
No, not right now.
Okay.
Although he might be showing up later. I'm not sure though. However long we go. We've been going
Okay.
for
So
like.
I'm not the only person that only showed up in case the Chinglican showed up, right?
Everybody wants to see Louis.
I want to hear his voice. I'm wondering what his voice sounds like. Interesting.
Well, you can watch some of our old hangouts if you've never heard him before.
Oh, I haven't. Maybe I will. Yeah.
Now, we were talking about some things that were related to Catholicism. What were the three things? Were paedocommunion, child baptism, and
Jesuits.
Jesuits too.
Okay.
But like concerts and things in the sanctuary.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh, right.
Okay.
Those were our four questions. So if you want to have
Okay.
your say on those one at a time, go for it.
Let's start with the biggest one first. Wait. So communion for
Children, yeah.
Oh, for children.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So just let me get an understanding of what your understanding of communion is, if you could, or what I'm arguing against, I guess.
Patrick, this was your
Sure.
bag.
So first of all, I'm not currently staking out a strong position here. This is
Okay.
something I'm, I guess you could say, exploring. The church I'm a member of practices paedocommunion. For reference, I'm a Presbyterian.
Okay.
Now, I guess go ahead. That's all the info. And if you have any questions,
Okay.
whatever, we'll figure it out. But
So your church. Okay. So your church does give communion to children then?
yes,
does
yes,
not?
it does.
It does? Okay. Well, I mean, the understanding, or at least my understanding of the Protestant understanding of communion is very different from ours.
Correct.
Because, we do believe in transubstantiation. Like that is something we profess, and no matter what the statistics say, that is the doctrine of the church, right?
Mm-hmm.
So historically, it's always been. Let's see. So yeah. So I mean, you have different practices and the different rites. So in
Right.
Eastern Rite Catholicism, they give communion at baptism, like in infancy.
Yes.
And then basically communion is union into Christ, right? So we didn't actually give children communion until Pius X. until like the last 100 years.
Wait, I'm sorry. So you're saying the Catholic Church now does give communion to children, and
We
it
give
has only
communion-
been over a century?
Well, different traditions have done it different ways. So the Orthodox, the Orthodox and Eastern Rite Catholics have always given children communion, like infants communion.
Right.
The Catholic Church has only started doing it since Pius X, so that was in the last like 110 years. Okay, he didn't lower it till like below the age of reason, though. But his understanding was that anyone who could understand transubstantiation should be able to participate in it. Now, you can argue as to whether or not he was right to do that. I personally think he should, like, the age should be raised a little bit to, like, right now it's at second grade, about the age of 7. I think it should be raised to about 9, but I'm just some guy. But before that, it was after confirmation. So it would have been, like, about, like, early teens.
So, my understanding, and you know, please correct me if I'm
Okay.
wrong. I'm not trying to misrepresent anyone. Is that the Catholic Church practiced paedocommunion, or you know, whatever particular term you need to use, but you know, extending communion to young children until the 8th century. I think it happened at the Second Council of Nicaea, but I'm not certain about that. It happened in that time frame, and then it was, again, I'm not trying to use inflammatory language, but taken away, I guess you would say.
Okay.
And I think that was one of the I mean, I think that's kind of where some of the various fault lines started within the schism, you know, the East-West schism, is just the changing of tradition.
Yeah.
In the same way that, if I'm not mistaken, it was the cup that was, again, I'm trying to use, you know, friendly language, but the taken away from the church for, or I should say from the laity for a while, and only restored, I believe, with the Council of Trent.
For like a day, and then Pius V found out about a spill, and they abolished the whole thing again. That was the reason they got rid of it, was because of the risk of spilling and profaning the sacred species in that way.
Sure, no, I mean,
to my understanding,
there's some logic to that, absolutely.
Yeah.
But so there are, you know, there are Catholics, right? You know, in full communion with Rome, which, like you said, is the Eastern churches, Byzantine and so forth, that do practice paedocommunion. And the whole of the Eastern Orthodox Church, as far as I'm aware, practices it still.
Yes.
And they are allowed communion, if I recall correctly, within Catholic churches, right?
Yeah, we commune them. They don't commune us, though.
Right. Well, of course not. You guys are Catholics.
Yeah.
But, so there's a large amount of, you know, if we're strictly talking about the Orthodox Catholic world, there's a lot of reason for why communion should be extended to children, and it's only a relative. I don't know. I mean,
is there an argument against?
Argument against,
like, giving communion to children? Is there any argument against it?
I don't think that. I mean, there's man, this is something that came up earlier, and I failed to locate the text, and then we started talking about other things, Canadian music of all things. It was atrocious, but
the Maple Law and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there are various arguments against it. I'm not intimately familiar with them.
Okay.
Because this isn't an issue I considered until relatively recently. I wasn't raised in a paedocommunion church, so this is all something I'm kind of working my way through, and was interested to, I don't know, I guess, talk to people about it and see what others think. And so I'm glad you showed up, because like, is there any? So you've mentioned spilling the wine, and I can see why, especially a child would, throw the bread or the wine, or
Yeah.
But
I mean, we don't give communion. I mean, we're not technically, so to speak, supposed to give communion on the. I mean, traditionally, we would never give communion on the hand. That's interesting too. But like, yeah, that's a very modern innovation, and that really has no origin besides some weird naturalistic attempt to curb disease. But it is kind of a ridiculous thing. Communion on the hand.
So
But
what is that?
communion on the hand. On the hand.
Yeah. What is that like?
Well,
on the hand or what?
Like when we give communion, distributing communion to the lay faithful by giving it from the priest, like the sacred species, from the priest to the communicant, by giving it to them like on their hands as opposed to directly into their mouth.
Oh, okay. That's kind of what I thought you meant, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's something that Catholics fight about a lot, because right now the church is allowing it.
It's absolutely haram.
Yes.
So I don't know. I guess I'll. Do we have someone else joining us, Ian?
Yes, it looks like our friend the Gnome has joined us. Swiss Gnome. You there, Swiss Gnome?
I believe that he's planning on lurking for a while.
Okay, well, when he's ready to speak, let us know.
Sorry about that. Someone came into the room. Oh yeah. So paedocommunion was the first thing.
Right.
So we addressed that.
Yes.
Okay.
Child baptism was the second one.
Okay. Do you guys practice child baptism?
Yes. I can't speak for all of us, but I do.
Okay, that's good. I think it's good. I mean, it's not. I mean, we're all the sacraments, depending on your sacramental theology. I mean, they're supposed to give grace and to elevate the natural above their natural level, into like bringing them into the supernatural reality. So why would we? It's like denying. Like, you wouldn't deny a child like their birthright just because they're a child. And if they're able to participate in that supernatural reality, the promise of heaven through the sponsor, yeah, I think it's good.
Well, I guess that the next question then is, if you shouldn't deny a child his birthright, then are you denying a child his birthright when you deny him communion?
Well, that's why the Orthodox say that you well, that's why they do give communion to the children, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But the reason we don't is because, like, communion is, properly speaking, like, it gives you the grace of like a supernatural communion, but it's especially to be used in times of like trial and temptation, and like, to build grace, to overcome and to struggle against that sort of thing. So that's why we have so like before the Pius X's reforms regarding communion, there was, people went to communion very rarely. It wasn't really a like a daily or a weekly thing more often, unless you were in certain religious orders that were allowed to go to communion daily. But now we're starting to see that, and especially in the American churches, there's very little discernment regarding going up for communion. But where was I? What were we talking about? We were talking about.
Well, I was just asking you if you are denying a child.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah.
And I mean,
so
I'm not trying to be.
The child already is able to participate fully in the birthright. But once they're able to sin, then they're going to need more grace to fight against the sin. And so that's why we give them communion at the age of reason, when they're able to fight against sin in a different way and to enter into the supernatural battlefield in a different way.
I need to add this because GNOME has sent me this. Sends me 1 Corinthians 11:27 and on from there. Wherefore, whosoever shall eat this bread and drink this cup of the Lord unworthily shall be guilty of the body and blood of the Lord. But let a man examine himself, and so let him eat of that bread and drink of that cup. For he that eateth and drinketh unworthily eateth and drinketh damnation to himself, not discerning the Lord's body. For this cause many are weak and sickly among you, and many sleep. And he says,
Yes.
communion is for born-again believers. He
Yeah,
is
thank
our
you, Gnome.
resident Baptist.
Yeah, that's definitely
That's what I was looking for earlier. But the question then would be, I mean, if children are innocent, then that doesn't apply? Question mark.
I think that he would respond with, but no man is worthy, no, not one. Oh, he's got something. Sorry for the silence.
Yeah.
What are we looking up now?
Oh, we're looking up the scriptural reference for explicitly adult communion, or confessing communion, I suppose would be more accurate.
I think that the response that he would give, and he's typing something, so if he gets that out, I'll let you know what it says. But Romans 3:10-12, as it is written, none is righteous, no, not one. No one understands, no one seeks for God. So the implication would be the kind of that even as children, we are not. What's the word? Right. And he says, kids who don't know what Jesus did for them can't memorialize it.
Can't what?
Memorialize it.
Oh,
Okay.
so you're, or he rather, is a memorialist. Okay.
This do in remembrance of me.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I
sorry,
certainly think you should remember Christ while you're partaking.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a different conversation. Then,
yeah, I just didn't want that to go unsaid. If no one ends up freeing himself up, then he can continue on with that. But let's get back to baptism. Baptism was where we were talking about.
Yeah, so I think it's good to baptize babies.
I think it's preferred. You ought to.
Yeah.
You're gonna piss off Gnome so much.
I'll bet.
Okay. What was the third thing?
I know we talked about the Jesuit thing, but I don't know if we were actually
serious.
The
Jesuits are, well...
Say something nice about the Jesuits.
Oh, that's right, yes.
Challenge.
Oh, that's the challenge as well?
Yeah.
All right. Well, there are good Jesuits and bad Jesuits, just like there are good astronauts and bad astronauts, I guess. Why not? And yeah, I mean, the Jesuit thing is, the thing is, the Jesuits that are good are more outspoken in the group, because the bad ones have all the power right now. Yeah, there are good Jesuits out there. I mean, you got like James Shaw, who I think recently died. You got, what's his name? John Hardin. Malachi Martin in his own way, although he left the Jesuits. But he's his own story. And then there's and even aside from the Jesuits themselves, there's something very important about Ignatian spirituality and the value of Ignatian spirituality. And like if you've ever looked into that, like the rules of discernment or the nation retreats or nation prayer, like really meditating on sensory things regarding events in the life of Christ, I think that there's a lot of value in that. So that's my good thing about the Jesuits.
All right.
Good job.
Thanks.
You're more successful than some of us.
I mean, when your only experience of the Jesuits is James Martin and our blessed Pope, then it's easy to be a little disheartened.
Wait, Francis was a Jesuit? I thought he was a Franciscan.
No, he was a Jesuit. He was a Jesuit.
Yeah, he is.
First
Okay.
Jesuit Pope. Yeah. Yeah. I think we misrepresent him. I think the media does more damage to him, and I think that there's like people can like. I think some slack is to be cut, but like I mean, Lord knows how hard it must be to be Pope.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, he seems to open himself, and I mean, obviously this is an outsider, right?
Yeah.
But he seems to open himself up to these kinds of situations. He gives, he gives interviews to a man perhaps with dementia who doesn't take notes or record. And I mean, that's really his only way of communicating to the outside world, basically, right? Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's scandal, quite frankly, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's probably giving scandal.
Yeah, I mean, scandal is a two-part sin, though, because it's a sin to be scandalized in a sense. Like, or at least that's my understanding of it. Is that like, I mean, it's woe to the block, but also woe to the guy who gets blocked, because you should like you're being led into sin, but you're still consenting to sin, right? Yeah,
Right, but
it's woe to. Yeah.
I mean, in this particular example, I mean, we don't. I mean, we don't know what we don't know the condition of his heart. We don't know what he's actually.
Yeah.
Um,
I think he's just like a grandpa. You know, you got like the two exactly, grandpapa. Yeah, like the two different types of grandpa, and Trump is one of them, and our Pope is the other one, and we're experiencing like what it feels like.
Yeah, I can get behind that metaphor.
Wait, and there was a fourth thing, right? Is there a fourth thing?
Yeah,
well, we can come up with all kinds of things about. Oh, actually, probably one of the biggest things we talked about is Catholicism a disunifying force in America?
Ooh, yeah.
Disunifying in what sense?
So, many senses, but specifically, you could I think credibly call the American colonies as, let's say, safe spaces for Protestants, right? We left the persecution, we came over here, we tamed the wilderness, and just as we were getting things going, Maryland showed up.
That's an amazing take. The Catholics are responsible for. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a strongly held belief. And so I will say, since you weren't here earlier, I do have a lot of Catholics in my life that I love very deeply. But we have such radically different views on certain things that it does. Like, one of I think the biggest problems in modern Christianity is the way ecumenism is done. Like, we don't actually stake out our distinctives. We don't, we want to sweep all that under the rug. We don't want to talk about the difficult issues. And some of these issues are, we have radically different notions of what it means to be a people, right?
Yes. Yes.
And this, so as a as a people who came, who unified together for a particular purpose, we won the war against, now that he's gone, against Bill's filthy royalist kind, but it was probably a marriage of convenience rather than one that I think basically I think our forefathers should never have worked together. There should not have been a Protestant Catholic alliance.
I'm tempted to agree.
Yeah, it's like, so this is something you hear about with Vatican II a lot, right? Oh, it Protestantized, the church.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean, it's like the Protestantism that affected the church really wasn't. I mean, there's some doctrinal issue, but it's more just doctrinal liberalism than doctrinal Protestantism. The only real Protestantism that we faced is like this weird kind of ecumenism that we added into our liturgy, but I don't think it's actually helping anybody. I mean, there are cases where like people might not have converted, but for hearing scripture in their vernacular at the mass, and receiving under both species, like from the chalice and also from like receiving the Eucharistic bread.
Well, absolutely. I mean, if you're arguing that people have become saved via Protestantism, yes, I absolutely concur. But
I think grace works like any way that God can work grace through anything.
Yeah, amen.
But but at the same time, extra ecclesiam nulla salus. There's.
I took German because I'm not Catholic, so I don't know.
No Latin then. Outside the church or beyond the church, or there is no salvation. That's our little expression. However, there's different ways of interpreting that, and the more charitable one is that everyone is Catholic in heaven, and that also like there's different ways to be baptized. But since you do have valid baptism, I think, right?
According to the Catholic Church, most baptisms are valid, is my understanding.
Yeah, except for like Mormons and Jehovah's Witness and a couple other weird ones.
Yeah.
The people that aren't actually Christian.
Yeah, I mean, they're non-Christian. What's that?
We don't let them in here, right, Ian? This is
yeah. Well, we did have a Mormon in here once, but that was.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
It wasn't a purposeful wife, right?
It was her, actually. Yeah.
Was it real?
That was the very first one. Yeah.
Oh man.
It was me, Mark Citadel, William Scott, and Ayla. Yeah.
Wow.
That was the.
What's she up to these days?
I think she's back on Twitter.
Oh, she is?
Yeah, I think I just saw her on somebody.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Oh, yeah, but, what were you saying?
Baptisms. Baptism.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
Baptism is good.
Swedenborgians.
Yeah, I don't think Catholicism and... I don't think that a Protestant Catholic relationship is really going to bear too much fruit in any like tangible way unless we like acknowledge the real difference. Because we can just be nice to each other, like we can just be polite, but what good is that going to do, right? If we both think that the other have serious issues in theology, we're not going to solve anything, right?
Yeah, amen. That's my point entirely. Is we should stop ignoring the things that our ancestors killed each other over.
Yeah, like they didn't die for nothing.
Right. Exactly. They in fact died for something, and that something is important. You guys are heretics.
Yeah, and so are you.
Well, no, but yes.
Now to take this both back to what we were talking about just before Joe joined us, and Gnome's pre-moniker is the founding fathers' example of where it could work with Protestants and Catholics was Switzerland. where there were clear lines of demarcation between the parts that were Catholic and the parts that were Protestant, but they still agreed on certain things and worked together on certain things. So, just that as an example of somewhere where it didn't turn out too bad.
That's
Well, I mean, so yeah, I think that's a pretty good example, but I mean, Switzerland almost has no federal state, right? I mean, it's most of it comes down to the canton level. So,
which was what America was supposed to be.
Yeah, exactly. Except as soon as the Catholics joined, then it all went to pot.
Well, I mean, we could blame the Catholics, but we could also blame the Dutch.
Oh, absolutely not. The Dutch are God's chosen people. Show me a people on the face of this planet who has taken more dominion over its creation.
The Romans.
Really? Did the Romans grow, like, did they intentionally change the color of carrots worldwide? Like, for funsies?
The Dutch also killed Elvis.
Wait, what?
Well, Colonel Tom Parker, wasn't he a Dutchman? And he worked Elvis to death.
You might have just totally destroyed my theory here, Ian.
I'm good at that.
I mean, is there any way that we could have? I don't think. I mean, maybe the Articles of Confederation weren't that bad after all.
The Articles of Confederation were perfect. I will fight anyone about this. It is the greatest American document of government that ever existed.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we're probably all in full.
Oh, except for the National Reform Association thing. You know about that?
No.
It's this thing that Chris Ferrara likes to cite a lot in lectures about like the dangers of Americanism. But he's very anti-John Locke.
Okay.
But he cites this he's very anti Enlightenment liberalism and everything. And the only way to really turn the tide of Enlightenment liberalism in the United States is to like found our country upon Christ instead of upon this kind of weird Lockean rights thing. So the way that they set out to do this was to add, right after the Civil War, mind you, add a clause in the Constitution of the United States acknowledging the sovereign kingship of Christ. Here's the interesting part. Although this sounds incredibly Catholic, it was mostly Presbyterians, and I think almost all Protestants that were in favor of this.
Really?
Yeah. I'll try to find a link.
If you could, that'd be great. I'm not familiar with this. Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, that'd beat out.
Yeah, the idea was to like that the Civil War was a punishment from God upon the United States for not acknowledging Christ in the Constitution. Here's the thing. Posted in the.
You look that up. I'm going to quote GNOME here, who still isn't joining us by voice, but says, the Constitution of 1874 made Switzerland more federalized, but still looser than most unions, and King George called the revolution the Presbyterian Rebellion.
Yeah, of course he did. Presbyterians were right.
No. The American Revolution was definitely a mistake.
Yes, this is true. But also was the Glorious Revolution, so where are we to draw the line?
I would... I mean, it wasn't a revolution.
This is a war of secession, really. I mean...
Well, I think it was a war for tradition, as long as we're getting into it. So, so the American colonies had self-rule, right? Like that had long been established.
Yeah.
And then that started to change. They started to lose more and more of their self-rule to the crown.
No, well, two things with that. First thing is it wasn't to the crown, it was to the British Parliament. They actually loved King George up until
Even
the
worse.
very last thing. Yeah, they hated Parliament, and a lot of the American Revolutionary rhetoric up until right before the signing of the Declaration of Independence was talking about how, okay, we're not on board with Parliament, but we still love the king. Don't worry, we still love the king. He's still great. Because a lot of the people were not on board with getting rid of the king. And the second thing is there wasn't a lot of taking away of actual like American sovereignty that happened. Like they taxed you guys a little bit, but
Yeah.
you ended up being taxed a lot more after the American Revolution. Like I think it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
So first of all, I would absolutely agree with
We
that.
done messed
If we're
up,
talking about
yeah.
taxes, yeah, strictly on the tax ledger, the American Revolution was a mistake. But if I recall correctly, and I might not recall this correctly, there was at least one colony that had its governor replaced by
Massachusetts after like riots and stuff. Like that was the thing, was that the people like Samuel Adams would like poke the bear, and then the bear would respond by saying, okay, the governor's not doing a good enough job, and then they'd replace the governor, and then they'd say that, yeah, that was completely, our guys didn't do anything wrong, they were completely innocent, and then this tyrant came in and completely destroyed our sovereignty. And then they would, as I mentioned before, they would use arguments about Quebec, saying that, and look what they did in Quebec or Canada.
Mhm.
Look what they did up there, and they're going to do that here next. And no, they hadn't. They didn't care. They really didn't. That was the thing. If you read the minutes from the parliamentary debate at the time, they didn't care. They didn't want to take over America and turn it into anything. They just wanted their money from the 7 Years' War, French Indian War. They just wanted that to be paid back off. That was it. Sorry,
Well,
this is like
usury is a sin. We have. There's no reason why we should pay that money back. They should not have lent that to us. It was a
except that
mistake.
George Washington was the one that started the war.
Well, yeah, no, okay. We can probably all agree that George Washington was.
A Freemason.
I believe he was. Yeah. Which is, by the way, for those not acquainted, is very much against the Westminster Confession. You cannot be a Freemason and be a Christian.
Oh, awesome. Love you guys.
Right? You're converting now.
Yeah. Not quite.
We'll get you there.
Take that, Sonus Rufus. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, man. I don't know.
I like him, but I don't like the Freemason thing. Yeah.
No, he's a good guy, and I've heard other people. I think I remember hearing Jim on the Fatherland mention, like, like for you Protestants, go be a Freemason. Like no.
Yeah.
You
It's
really
more
ought
of a
not to.
Mormon thing than anything else. The Mormons are.
I
mean,
remember-
if you were going to associate with one religion, like Mormonism is like the Freemason religion.
it's true. They do have a lot of like esoteric stuff that
Yeah.
like happens behind closed doors. I've heard.
Yeah. Like Joseph Smith was a Mason. At least that's what David Cross said in his stand-up thing.
Well, we can't trust David Cross. David Cross is a Jew too, so I mean.
Yeah. I mean, no, he was just citing about how ridiculous Scientology is, but then he also went to do a thing about how bad Mormonism is, because Mormonism is just 18th century Scientology.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty accurate.
Maybe, I guess. I don't know. Sure. Yeah, I guess it depends on exactly what you mean by that. They're certainly both like weird cults that deny Christ, but
At least Mormons are nice.
oh man, that's so true. I've known a fair number of them, and yeah, they're usually pretty good people.
Yeah. I met a couple on a subway once. They were very more many.
Yeah.
And they gave us the Osmonds, so I mean, come on.
I'm sorry, they gave us what?
The Osmonds.
Oh, yeah.
I actually unironically like the Osmonds.
Oh.
Oh.
Whoa, come on.
Oh.
Sorry to disappoint you, Bill.
No, I don't have strong feelings one way or the other with the Osmonds.
It's good, wholesome entertainment. Right?
I wouldn't know.
assume.
Is it a Canadian show?
I don't think a Canadian show is necessarily wholesome.
I honestly have no idea.
They were a brother and sister singing duo thing.
Oh,
Well, actually,
Oh, I
that was
see.
Donnie and Marie, but they were. There's a bunch of older brothers who also performed together.
Yeah, they were. Didn't they have a cartoon for a little bit?
I believe they did, yes. And it was,
oh, I found them. Oh, this is very, very of what it is. Oh, like Donnie Osmond. Okay. Okay. All right.
yeah, that family.
That guy. All right. Yeah.
Okay, now what was, speaking of, since we're back on music, the fourth thing, or fifth thing because of the Jesuit thing, concerts specifically.
Oh, yeah. That.
Yeah. Okay. What is the Catholic position on that?
Okay. Well, we do have them an annoying amount. Traditionally, you would not have one, and if you were to have one, you would have the Blessed Sacrament taken out of the church, which is what happens in Rome. I hear most frequently is that if they're going to have one, then they take it out of the church. Generally, they try to keep them at least somewhat like praise and worshipy, right? But it's more like, yeah. I mean, you wouldn't see like a jazz show in a Catholic church, I think. And if they were to have that, they would take the Blessed Sacrament out. But for the most part, it's they try to keep it like almost like a service. They try to keep it like a prayer service where everyone's like singing along to the songs. And sometimes they have one in the context of a holy hour, which is where we take the. Do you guys know what a holy hour is?
No.
Adoration, benediction, that sort of thing.
The words are ringing a bell, but explain it for me. I'm sure
Okay.
that the other two know, or the other three know, but explain it.
It's probably one of the things that would scare Protestants the most. It scares Orthodox enough. We take the Blessed Sacrament and we put it in what's called a monstrance, and it holds the Blessed Sacrament, and we're able to see it well and to adore it, because we do believe that it is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ, and so we worship it through praying directly to Him, I should say.
I was going to say that the it versus him distinction is probably really important.
Him.
That's
Interesting.
Like I said.
Yes. So you were saying that as part of what was the name of the hour thing again?
Holy hour?
Holy hour. I was thinking happy hour, and it was
no, not
wasn't
that.
it. That was definitely different. So as part of holy hour, you would do something like that.
Oh yeah, so they would have like one of these kind of like modern worship bands, and they would play music during the holy hour. So it's generally some kind of like Christian music, not exactly rock.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah, it's like that, like Hillsong type stuff. Very repetitive. Very often not very good.
Yeah.
Very bland and generic.
Yes.
So now, the original example that was used was Handel's Messiah, and looking at the Wikipedia page, that was written using the King James Bible. So how would that be acceptable? Would that be kind of a gray area, or
Handel's Messiah?
Yeah,
I think that would cover more like the it's basically a liturgy. Well, not exactly a liturgy, but it's a service, right? So you have you're doing these things for the greater glory of God. It's not nearly as it's not like a jazz concert or something like that.
So, how about getting a little more divorced from that, like a Christmas pageant, like put on by a public school, right? So this is not, a ministry of the church. This is just some guys who want to put on a retelling of the Christmas story.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it would depend on who's running the church, but I think for the most part, if they're not Catholics, they probably wouldn't be able to use the church. But that being said, like, abuses will happen, I think. But I'm not even sure it would be an abuse. It is kind of a gray area, I guess.
Yeah.
It sort of depends on like the intent. Like generally Protestants will have their own church to do things like that in if they want to do them. Like we have, like my Catholic grade school, we had our Christmas pageant in the gym, like in the gymnasium. It wasn't like this. It wasn't a church thing really. Church was for liturgy and.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, honestly, it sounds like you're confirming everything I said about you guys, which is.
Oh, is that good?
Well, I mean, other than the fact that you guys destroyed America, yes.
Oh no, but we're trying to.
Right. No. I feel like I've got a pretty good grasp on the Christian. I'm sorry, a bit of a Freudian slip there, but the Catholic view on things. Yeah, so I think that pretty much a lot of the arguments you use, like the presence of the Eucharist, were things that I mentioned. So I'm glad I wasn't misleading the one viewer who was here at that time.
No, it's true. Patrick pretty much got it right.
Good.
Confirmed. Expert on Catholicism. Move over, Pope.
So I had, if no one, if we're kind of putting a cap on the concerts in, oh no, there was another question with that. Is there a distinction made between the sanctuary and, let's say, there's probably not a gymnasium in a Catholic cathedral, but some other meeting space, in like a cathedral or something? Would there be a distinction made there?
How exactly do you mean? So like the sanctuary is just like past the steps that are at the very like front of the church where the altar and everything is?
Right.
Yeah, and then the other part would just be like the nave where all the pews are and everything.
Okay. Never mind about that distinction then.
Okay. But I don't know if there would be any other, like, what kind of part do you mean?
Maybe a rectory that was in the same building.
Oh, like a rectory, like part of the same building but a different space?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I suppose a church could have something like that. I've never seen one. I mean, there are churches with like chapels in the basements, but sometimes, like, I think actually, come to think of it, there is a church near me with like classrooms underneath it, or churches with like it's like a hall underneath in the city, especially. You see that, and that's where something like a talk would take place, like a catechism talk would take place, or even just a brunch after mass, that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So is that good?
Yeah, that makes sense. So now that I've had that answered, does anyone else? Were there any other questions from the chat or anything about anyone's position, not just Joe's, but anyone's position on concerts and churches?
I haven't seen anyone talk about that.
No,
I
a lot
see
of
some
more-
pushback on the Dutch being God's blessed people.
Hooray!
I see some agreement with how terrible the Freemasons are. No word yet on the Jesuits, but I assume we'll get a deluge soon.
So if there are no more questions from the chat, I had another question for everyone, and I think that Noam already responded to this. But what is the deal with dating the New Testament? I realized I don't remember what the context was for it, but I've always heard the date after 70 AD given for Mark. And that marks the earliest of the Gospels, and that it was written sometime after 70 AD. And I never kind of gave any second thought to why that would be the case. And then I realized that was because they're saying that it had to have happened after the destruction of the temple.
Mm-hmm.
And like the kind of the point of the Bible is that it's not restricted temporally like that, right? Like it's if they mention something about the temple being destroyed, that doesn't mean it was written after the temple was destroyed. It's entirely possible, given the context of the Bible, that the Bible was just predicting that happening. So why is it that Christians generally don't, that isn't something that is immediately argued against, the dating of the Bible in that way?
Well, so I mean, I think it generally is. I think that one of the problems not problems, but so we don't have the original autographs, right? We don't have the original, the handwritten gospel of X, Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, whomever. So the earliest manuscripts do date from after that point. I mean, I think at this point the earliest manuscript we have is in the 1st century, if I'm not mistaken. I mean, we keep finding older and older copies, but I think that's in essence what their argument really is, which is you can't prove to me that this happened for this arbitrary event. And like, okay, I mean that's it's an arbitrary event that you're setting up. Yes, I can't. I can't show you that text existing before then, but there's plenty of other things we can talk about, right? Whether that be the Gospels being some of the best proof that Pontius Pilate was the governor of Judea at the time, but also being confirmed by secular texts. I mean, I know there's a lot of evidence. I'm not really an evidentiary guy. Maybe somebody else here in the chat is, but
I wasn't really looking for evidence, because I kind of have a feel for that as well. It's more just that I've heard pastors and online Christians and other people mention the 70 AD thing, and I've never heard any pushback against it. Like I'm just, it's blown my mind when I realized that connection was there, that they're dating this because they say that it can't be referencing something that hasn't happened yet. That blew my mind, that I had never heard anyone argue against it. So if you guys know of any like good books for arguing about that, I would love to read them. But it's just weird to me that isn't something that's immediately like that people that say the 70 AD thing aren't immediately swarmed by Christians saying, no, you don't know that.
Anybody? Bueller? Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd go back and say, I think this is one of those places where they are using our, despite the fact that we have copious evidence, they're using like that one specific thing we don't have against us. But also, I think it's kind of a recognition of the importance of 70 AD and the fall of the temple, right? I mean, I think they're pretty explicitly confirming like the importance of that, maybe implicitly rather, in the sense that this was a prophecy, and it did happen, and golly shucks, they really wish it didn't.
I'm just gonna. Sorry to interrupt, but
No, please, I'm done.
No, yeah, I'm just gonna hop off real quick. I had a really good time. Thank you for the invite, Bill, and I hope to see you guys again.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
You. Have a good night, guys.
Good to hear from you. Have a good night.
Take care.
God bless.
God bless.
We actually had a question from the chat. If you want to get to that, or unless somebody has anything else they want to say about this topic that we're on.
I got nothing. I got nothing.
Nothing further? Okay. So let's read what World Has Me Not says. He says, a large body of unbelievers today are speaking about a topic of atheism not meaning denying God exists, but instead that it means a lack of belief in God. I find this very disingenuous since agnostic is the proper term for that standpoint. What are your thoughts on words theist and gnostic, and conversely atheist and agnostic? And are these atheists trying to redefine atheism, just doing the devil's work, trying to cut down potential believers even further by claiming Christians need more evidence? So, I guess...
yes, they're trying to do the devil's work.
Well, of course.
Just like you take a stab in the dark, you're probably gonna... that's probably gonna be the right answer.
Well, as from a linguistic standpoint, I always kind of... I'm not... I had to brush up on my roots a bit, but I always felt like putting A at the beginning implied sort of just an absence of something rather than like a opposite of something. Like,
yeah.
So like atheist means like absence of theism, or like agnostic means absence of knowledge. That's how I always kind of understood that. So I suppose you could say that being an atheist means just an absence of belief in God, as these people define it.
No, because it's absence of God, right? It's not absence of belief in God. That would be, I don't know what the Greek word for is.
Well, I thought ism meant belief in. So if A means absence, the means God, and ism means belief in, it would be like an absence of belief in God, right? Or am I getting that wrong?
Is ism belief in?
That's what I thought it meant. Like, we could check.
Well, I will say where you were going with that, Bill, is interesting because, yeah, it's because whether or not they believe in God, they are absent God, right? They're entirely outside the faith. Yeah, I don't know. It was interesting. I'm sorry. I'll let you wordspurg some more, guys.
I'm a wordspurg, all right. Let's see. Let's go to dictionary. What this article says.
So
it says a distinctive doctrine, theory, system, or practice. A suffix. Let's see. A suffix appearing in Low Greek was used to form action nouns from verbs. The suffix.
Is anyone else having trouble hearing
Ian?
Yeah, Ian is indeed breaking up.
Ian, you're gonna have to repeat like all of that. I didn't You were breaking up the whole time.
Okay, let's see if can you hear me now?
You're
It's
still
better.
doing something funky.
You guys are breaking up a little. I don't know if my connection.
I think it might be you're coming in clear for a short burst and then going out.
Let me see if something's slowing
Patrick
down my
sounds fine to me. So I think it might be you, Ian.
Yeah, likewise,
me.
Bill. You sound great. Your smooth Canadian
My
tones.
dulcet tones.
They're yeah, I'm romanced. No, but
The website is slowing me down.
it must
Oh,
be.
maybe, yeah.
I have a really old laptop, so I need a new one. So sometimes certain websites will slow down the computer
Are you
a bit.
taking donations for a laptop?
I mean, if you want to give them to me, sure. My PayPal
sure,
is no.
We can probably figure this out.
Support my Patreon, y'all. No, I've never accepted a cent from anything I've done for the dissident right. So
see, Bill, this is what I'm saying. He doesn't take any money, and now his laptop's going to break down tomorrow. This is how we lose.
How do we
valuable
set up?
people.
How do we set up super chat? How do we get
yeah, I
money
wonder.
directly to Ian?
People actually donate. Let me. Sorry, I'm gonna.
You other two guys out there, give us money, and by us I mean me. Put in the name of Ian. I'll make sure it gets to him in Canada, Stan, or wherever he's at.
I'm not in Canada.
I'm the only Canadian right now.
It's too late. These people are convinced their money doesn't work in Canada. So I don't know. But back to the actual question about atheism before we lose our one viewer.
We have 6. It's okay.
Well,
one of them just said, "Take my money." Yeah. For next time, work on that, Ian. But yeah. So sorry, we were talking about the ism. So what? Now that your connection's working a little bit better, Ian, what was the answer?
Oh gosh, it was this long, convoluted thing. I would have to. It was so long, but I think it just basically said it was like ism does mean like sort of like a doctrine or a system of belief, sort of.
Okay.
That's how it. And I'd have to find out what A means, but I have to find it from a site that isn't so ad heavy that's going to slow down my browser. Okay. So like a prefix. Let's see what that would mean.
Well, apolitical means not political.
Right. So
absence of politics.
I mean, but there's a lot of like negative ones. Like A means kind of an absence, whereas dis means like not something, or un means to like do the opposite of, or taking away from. Like there's kind of different sort of feelings to each one. Okay, I see A is a prefix meaning toward, like afar or ashore. Okay, I see one dictionary.cambridge.org says it means not or without. So yeah, that does imply sort of like just an absence more than like the opposite. So I suppose, I guess if I haven't been scared off by this these detours we take. Like, I mean, agnostic means like without knowledge, if I'm not mistaken, because gnosis is knowledge. So when you say you're agnostic, you mean I just don't know. Like I said earlier, I'm agnostic about the subject of life on other planets, because I really just have no way of knowing. I don't hold a belief in that. Like, so you could say that. I mean, as far as like atheism goes, though, like I know that I think it was Richard Dawkins who actually defined like there's a spectrum of atheism. There's the positive theist, the agnostic theist, the total agnostic, and there's the agnostic atheist, and then there's the positive atheist. So it's like a positive atheist or a positive theist is someone who's absolutely certain of his position and has no doubt in his mind. An agnostic theist or atheist is someone who, like an agnostic says, I don't believe in God, but I'll intellectually allow for the possibility that there could be a God. I just don't subscribe to that belief that there is. And that's what Richard Dawkins classifies himself as. And the agnostic is just someone who says, I don't know one way or another. And I guess you might have...
I gotta think that that's a bit of a straw man thing, saying that I'm not these crazy guys that are 100% sure. I could be convinced hypothetically. You're just never going to convince me, right? Like
Well.
I think that that's what the lovely viewer is kind of talking about, is that it's Richard Dawkins using this spectrum thing, and you're right. I remember that. I don't remember which one it was in, but he's kind of using it as a way of weaseling away from the force of his own arguments, so that you can actually fight against it. You know, like he's saying that I'm mildly agnostic. I don't know for sure, as if that gives him, I don't know, get out of jail free card or something.
Yeah, I think this is really the heart of the matter, which is basically we're like, when we're talking about these things, we're accepting their frame, we're accepting their the moral of their argument. Like, really, there are two kinds of people. You know, there are Christians and there are anti-Christians. And whether or not they're unsure or actively hate, whatever, it doesn't matter. They're all actively working against God. They're all actively hating God, and everything else is really besides the point. I mean, you know, I guess they're kind of interesting, like you know, theoretical questions, but they don't really matter. I mean, the anti, or rather the atheist and the anti-theist don't really disagree, right? The only difference is, I don't know, I guess one like wakes up on Sunday morning to protest. Like I'm not really sure, but like, no, they hate God, and I mean, that's their worldview, right? Everything else, be damned. So these distinctions are, you know, it's like, how pregnant are you? You know, how much AIDS do you have? Like,
these are yes or no questions.
Precisely.
Well, yeah, I guess I see what you're saying. That is, and World Has Me Not was saying that's exactly the point he's making, is that they're just kind of using it to sort of like place themselves in a position where they says, my belief is that these deniers of God are starting to realize how stupid of an idea it is that a universe could be created from and by nothing. So instead of being honest they were wrong, they instead want to change the meaning of atheist. Yeah, it is kind of true what you said also, Patrick, just that, like, I have seen atheists who do this sort of, like, I'm not saying I actively disbelieve in God, I'm just saying I don't hold a belief in God, but then the next sentence they'll start making fun of Christians or something like that, and it's like, well, so either way you still just hate the idea of God and you want to make fun of it and think it's stupid. So I don't know.
Because I mean,
I've seen people who do that thing.
When you talk to an atheist and say, well, look, man, I understand you don't believe in God, and like, whatever, that's fine or something, which is certainly not something I would say. But you then say, well, you know, could you leave us alone, right? Like can you leave us alone for a little bit so we can do this thing? Like, no, they can't. They have to, you know, they want you to bake the cake, right? Like, whatever it is, they want to actively damage your relationship with God. which really means that they're not atheists, they're just anti-theists. And by theists, we really just mean Christ, right? Like that, they don't hate the idea of gods. I mean, these people, they're happy to celebrate, Buddhism or some other, pagan ideas. I mean, especially in this, like, I don't know, right-wing, distant right, I think was the term you used earlier, Ian, world that we inhabit. Like, these, like, neo-pagans attack us the first opportunity they get. Like, it doesn't matter what it's about. It's usually something stupid. It's usually something that we don't actually really have much disagreement about, but they can't stop themselves because, I mean, they hate the king of the world.
Yeah, so to answer your question, world has me not. Yes. I thought that was funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's probably there's at the very least probably something underhanded going on with the use of definitions by the atheist and that either, even if there isn't something underhanded going on, like consciously by them, it's not wholesome, not Christian. Don't listen to them.
Amen.
Do we have any? Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead. Ian.
I was going to say, I have a PDF from Stefan Molyneux of his thing Against the Gods, but I haven't actually gotten around to reading it to see what his arguments are for why God doesn't exist. But
oh no, it's not going to be good.
I know. I mean, I remember him making this one argument that was kind of weird. Like, I'm trying to remember what it was, because he was actually took a phone call from somebody who was trying to make an argument for the existence of God, and it actually was a good discussion just as far as like being polite. Like, they weren't like hostile toward each other. They were just making arguments back and forth, and it was actually civil, but I guess just I want to have a way to respond to arguments. Free Domain Radio, donate.
$1 fucking dollar.
He never actually said that. Like, he's just like, $1. $1, really?
Well, I mean, that's the thing about memes, right?
Yeah, it's a meme, really.
They encapsulate the truth rather than, like, explain the truth.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, people make fun of him for that, but you guys have no idea how much $1 American buys up here.
Oh man. Can you guys still buy candy bars for $1?
When they're
we
on
left
sale,
that
yeah.
territory a long time ago.
No,
really? Oh.
When they're on sale, yeah. Well, two for $2, yeah.
That's not bad. It's a discount there. You buy in bulk. But no, I don't know. Molyneux's a frustrating guy. I mean, right? He's one of these guys, and there's a lot of them out there, that we see in the right, where they can describe problems, but they can't really sufficiently lead you to answers.
Yeah.
Like Molyneux, to the best of my knowledge, and I mean, he's not a guy I follow super closely these days, but he has yet to really explain why he's shifted rightward. I mean, from his ANCAP days, which I think he did a good job of explaining, but...
Well, I think he's still an ANCAP. I mean, I watched a recent video where he was basically advocating for ANCAP philosophy.
Well, what was the I think that he's just gone in a who was the democracy, the god that failed one?
Hans
Hoppe.
von Hoppe.
Yeah. I think he's just kind of going in that direction where things need to be authoritarian, things need to be
Right.
there need to be firm walls in order to have a nice garden.
Yeah, I think that is kind of where he's gone.
Which, I mean, is in the problem is though is that seems to run against his earlier ideas, right? Like, so if it's okay for the state to exert authority over its citizens, why is it not okay for a parent to exert authority over their children? Because, right, I mean, that's one of his big deals, peaceful parenting. And to the best of my knowledge, he's never, he's never really made that argument. And again, I don't follow him super closely. Maybe he has.
Now he does have I've just because they pop up on my recommended YouTube. I don't think I've watched any of them, but he has a bunch of videos about why I changed my mind on.
Mm-hmm.
So my suggestion would be to check there. He's like I've seen 6 or 7 of them. Where he
Which issue are you referring to?
Sorry?
Like, are you talking about Molyneux changing on a certain issue?
PATRIK was, yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Like, which one are you thinking of? Because I follow him fairly closely. He's
well,
just very
I think he's honestly changed his mind. So he's a hard guy to pin down. I think he's changed his mind on anarcho-capitalism, like in general. Period. Full stop.
I don't think that's true. Well, I think what he supports is property rights. So he thinks that defending borders is like sort of like he supports Trump because Trump believes in defending borders, and therefore I guess he looks at that as sort of like a step in the right direction intellectually, and but he does, I believe, like I just watched a recent video from like a couple days ago, and I think he was still talking about how statism is something that people need to overcome, and like he's still an anarchist. He just believes that, like, you know, part of having freedom, which is his ultimate goal and everything, which again I think is one area where he is misguided, but he recognizes that to have freedom you have to have property rights, and so protecting borders is one part of that, and so that's why he supports, like, I think his basic view is that he supports anarchy with like no governments, but he does think that he basically advocates for a voluntary society where we, in his mind, we would have all the things we have now, but we just wouldn't have a government administering them. We would just be doing them privately, and it would be more efficient because there'd be profit motive behind it and that kind of thing, instead of inefficient. Right. So, like, I don't think he's really changed his mind about anarcho-capitalism. He just recognizes that you kind of, like you said, you kind of need to have certain parameters to have a functioning anarcho-capitalist space, I guess.
Yeah. So again, I mean, I don't want to misrepresent anyone who isn't here, but my understanding is he doesn't just support Trump and like the idea of shutting down borders, but he has also turned to protectionism since Trump. My understanding, right? Again, I don't follow him intimately, but like it does seem like he has kind of developed a bit of a schizophrenic worldview where he's kind of holding multiple positions at the same time. And look, I understand that. I come out of anarcho-capitalism, and so my first instinct is still that individual freedom, but at the same time, like, no. It's just like, no. Freedom for what? Freedom, in the case of the last question,
it is immoral to initiate force against somebody else, and therefore the state is fundamentally immoral.
Right, exactly.
That's like how he looks at it.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a nice little moral philosophy. I think the bow fits, but certainly he seems to find himself wanting more than what his stated moral philosophy covers.
I do think he is kind of. I do agree that he probably is a bit more hardcore on some things than he publicly states. Because when I listen to a lot of what he says, I do sense that deep down he probably is more our guy / than he lets on. But yeah, that's just. But he kind of has his own little persona that he's created for himself and his own public ideology that he has to adhere to, and he can't completely back off it. I mean, it's possible someday he will, but because he does admit when he's wrong, but at least most of the time. But I don't know. This is my speculation.
No, I'm with you there. I do think that Steph is an honest guy. I think he is honestly seeking the truth, and he might sometimes get distracted by donations, but I think he's a good dude. I wish he were more fully in our camp, especially with regards to Christ, but we'll get there.
We have another question from World Has Me Not. I want to read this one out so you guys have to answer it. Another question is, do you agree with my theory that the internet may no longer be used by people and businesses by about the year 2025 because of security hacking and also lack of human interaction, these issues growing so much to where people will collectively decide it's no longer worth the risk and loss of joy in life?
I personally don't think so. I think that they're constantly. I think that as far as the internet and security goes, like they're constantly developing new technology for it. They're constantly trying to improve its security. Like I know, again, to bring up Molyneux, I saw a video where he talked about how there is different technology they can use that would be more secure than the internet as we have it today, blockchain. I don't know a lot about it. He said if they'd waited the internet would be a lot more secure if they'd waited till blockchain technology existed. So I don't know if they're constantly developing these new technologies for transmission of information, then I can't see it just dying out, at least not in the next 7 years. And also, I was actually just having a conversation earlier today just about how miraculous the internet is and how, it's so easy to find information with the internet because, you used to have to go to the library and look through like these books that were 700 pages long just to find one piece of information you wanted. And now it's like at your fingertips, and it's a lot easier to discover things and learn things when it's more easily accessible. So, and as far as the issue of people just deciding that the human isolation isn't worth it, well, I would like to hope that's the case, but I don't think enough people are that introspective to totally turn their back on something as beneficial as the internet just for that. So that's my take on it.
Patrick?
I think the internet revolution and its consequences have been a disaster for mankind. More specifically, I think that the internet is good because of the culture that created it. However, if we get back to a more genuine culture, a more Christ-centered culture, I think it would be destructive. So by 2025, I do indeed hope that we have gotten much closer to our local communities, built around the church, and we have no need to talk to these Canadians.
I wouldn't talk to a Canadian if I didn't have to.
Well, I mean, you know,
I don't blame you. I don't blame you. Don't worry about it.
I also wouldn't talk to someone on the other side of this country. I wouldn't talk to, I don't know, all of mighty men, the Dutch Calvinists out there either. I mean, we should be in our own local communities as much as possible. Occasionally, there is information that we can receive from others, but the internet has a way of. I think it's really destructive to the natural community. I mean, it's great again when we're dissidents in a kind of small movement, you know, strewn across the globe. But when, you know, right now somewhere in we'll say North America, there's some kid who, instead of like having family dinner, is, I don't know, like watching whatever gay stuff is on YouTube. I don't know, or more likely porn, right? Like, you know, the internet is affecting his personal relationships, and I'm sure at the, you know, at the moment it didn't seem like much of a sacrifice at all, but I think these kinds of things add up, and yeah, basically, I think the internet was a mistake, although I think it was necessary to get out of, you know, the basically to kick the Catholics out of Maryland, we needed the internet to tie it all back together. Like, I think we will reestablish and you know, a more strongly established, you know, a more faithful community, but a covenantal nations, and again, the internet. Like, why would we talk to each other? We all have the only truth that's really necessary, and I guess we'll move on from there, right?
So you're saying is that the internet in Maryland were mistakes?
Yeah, exactly. That is my official
position.
Exodus
Americanus, that's what the title of this would be.
Yes. I'm awaiting my invite, Roscoe. I can't wait to join the Great American Houseboat.
Houseboat nationalism?
Oh man, yeah, absolutely. Why wouldn't you?
No, it's true. I enjoy my houseboat.
What would happen if your boat started sinking, though? Would you be able to get all your stuff out?
No, probably not. But that's true of any, like, you ask a guy with a yacht that, he's going to say the same thing.
Well,
right. So I have other storage places that has some of my stuff, and like flotation things that would let me save like bank records or whatever. But it's a boat. It's a boat. It's the price you pay for the life you lead.
Is it true that in the winter you can just like walk across the lake?
You can't walk across the bay. The bay doesn't, because it's salt water. It doesn't, or like salty.
Oh.
Doesn't freeze as thoroughly. But there are lakes up here that you can walk across. Yes.
I know, Lake in the Woods you can, right? Lake of the Woods. I've heard that you can actually go to the northwest angle of Minnesota by walking across the ice during the winter months.
I heard that. I read that somewhere recently.
I was just reading about the northwest angle because little oddities like that fascinate me.
Oh, I was Wisconsin. Wisconsin was the one that I was reading about.
Okay.
What were we talking about just before that, though? Oh, yeah, the internet. Everything's going to get worse in ways that we can't predict. So if the internet's going away by 2025, it's going to be replaced by something significantly worse. That's my prediction, Mr. What's your name again? Your world has me now. Yeah. And TV was a mistake and radio was a mistake, according to you. You wrote that, and
Yes.
I agree with it. This is all a mistake.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, these are the kinds of things you say on the internet, but I think all of us should be much more rooted in our natural communities. I mean, obviously, there's nothing, say, evil about radio waves, but the ability to focus on events outside of those things that affect us, I think are have serious negative consequences. And I mean, I think in the future, probably by 2025, if I'm going to be honest, like, yeah, we won't really have these. I don't say we won't have them. We won't have much need of them. We'll instead all be tucked away in our happy, close-knit communities, occasionally trading titanium or something.
Well, that sounds like a fun time. On
Right?
that note, I am gonna have to call it a night, though.
Yeah, we've been here for almost 3 hours, so we probably should start wrapping up. But you know, Snowman still hasn't spoken. Did he want to say anything before you leave? We wrap up? No. Also, put a link to your Twitter in the description, just because you were there.
He did have some choice quotes.
Being a rascally little guy, watching it. The Elf on the Shelf, or no, wait.
Gnome in the Room?
Yeah, there you go. I think on the Fatherland they said Elf on the Shelf was degenerate, so I shouldn't say that. Of course, I haven't listened to the Fatherland in probably well over a year, so I don't know.
It's, you know, like many of these things, it's a mixed bag. But I gotta say, no, dude, come on. Like,
sorry, guys, just working. It's end of the quarter. Okay, well, if he's got work to do, then I understand if he can't talk, if he's plugging away in an office somewhere.
We all showed up only for you. You're one of my favorite accounts on Twitter. I think I've liked every tweet you've ever made. And if I haven't, I'll fix that shortly. But
Patrick's standing, you know. Anyway, I really do have to sign off, though. So
well, let's yeah. Why don't we just wrap up here? I'll just like give a little closing, and we can just bring it to a nice tie it up here.
All right.
All right. So now, Patrick, why don't you give GNOME your Twitter handle, because I think he wants it. Okay. So anyway, thank you to Patrikos. Thank you, Bill Marchant. Thank you for Joe, who was earlier. Thank you, Swiss Gnome, for coming. It turned out to be really good. I'm glad that we ended up having one, because I was afraid we would show up, but it ended up being a good discussion. So thanks, guys. And for all our 6 viewers out there, thank you for showing up, and anyone who was here earlier. Have a good night, and God bless.
God bless.
God bless.